Hi, everybody. I hope you are all well, and I'm really excited to be facilitating this session on corporate parenting and my view of it. So, just a little bit about the Care Leaders is that the Care Leaders are an organization that provide training that gives you lived experiences and theories. We combine both of those things together. We think it's really important that with every training session that you have, you get lived experiences and you get a theory, which will be littered throughout this training program, and also to give you practical tools to help young people that have experienced trauma. So, a quick note about your well-being before I get into this session. I am going to talk about children in care and those with a social worker because of adversity at home, which, yeah, for some people can be sensitive. So just take care of yourselves, take care of your colleagues. But what I'm not going to be doing is I'm not going to be sharing stories that are going to make you see or visualize, difficult, traumatic experiences in your mind. But we are obviously going to be talking about some of the issues that impact young people that we are corporate parents for. So, what is a corporate parent? Well, for the purpose of this presentation, I want to kind of introduce a character, which is called the moralist. Now, from my perspective, a corporate parent has the duty to ensure that those that we care for, are appropriately looked after and supported. And obviously, corporate parent is this term in which encapsulates many things within children's social care and within the council and sort of even the community. But to embody it, I want you to just imagine this phrase, the moralist. And the way I see a corporate parent is that you are essentially a moralist. And for those that work directly with young people, I just want you to consider a young person that you're trying to support and keep them in mind for this speech. Because we're going to give you some tools and techniques that the moralist will use, and they will be really helpful to use and to support this young person with. So before I get into it, my name's Luke Rogers. I'll be facilitating this session. I've got a really unique set of experiences. So I was in care from a really young age and sort of left care also at quite a young age, and actually naturally moved into social care. I was a personal trainer first, and I would facilitate health and fitness events for children in care. And what that then turned into was to do projects with children in care. And I started to do projects with the services around the children in care. And then I started to get into consultancy. That turned into social enterprise, all the way up until in 2022, I was a fellow at the Side Business School at the University of Oxford. My area of expertise is in social entrepreneurship, which is a skill that I use for children's social care, and also storytelling. Like, I really love to tell stories. I think stories really invoke emotion. They tap into our empathy. And obviously then coupling that with strategies and actions, we can really see some important change. Speaking about important, what is most important about this particular presentation is that I was also a former school bad man. And there's a reason that I am telling you this, because obviously as a former thug for school, and when I used to behave in a particular way at school, school would respond in one of two ways. That was the behaviorist approach or the nurture approach. Now, why I'm telling you this and why this is important to know as a moralist, as a corporate parent, is because obviously, if we're parents, we have to support our children. Our children in care are going through quite a number of things, but two of those things they're going through is one is they're experiencing trauma because of their adverse childhood experiences. And from that trauma, they will present particular behaviors. Now, the behaviors are the things that we have to respond to. And the way in which humans respond to behaviors are usually in one of two schools of thought. Number one is the behaviorists, which is the Mrs. Trunchballs of the world. Love sanction and reward, love routine, love discipline. And the second is the nurturists, which is Peter Pan. Behavior is communication. They want a compassionate approach, and they really believe in relationships being the key to everything. Now, the thing is about these two approaches is that we often argue. Trunchbull will argue with Peter Pan. Peter Pan will tell Trunchbull that she's wrong. Trunchbull will tell Peter Pan that he's soft. And we kind of have this belief that you need to be one or the other. The behaviorists will say, young people need to have a hard line. They need to understand right and wrong. They need all of this discipline. But the nurturist will say, yeah, but that can actually be re-traumatizing for young people. Actually shouting at a child that's been through abuse and neglect is not okay. Having these really strict boundaries might, remind them of people that have abused power. And it can feel for behaviorists, it can feel quite paralyzing. But the behaviorist will respond to that and say, yeah, but actually, not all young people are behaving in a way as a response to their trauma. Sometimes young people are just trying to wind me up. Actually having relationships with every single young person in my class can be a really difficult thing if we have this in a schools context. So we tend up arguing between these two spaces. The reality is, if we're going to be moralists, children need both. And it's a spectrum. And for the purpose of this presentation, this is where I sit on that spectrum. I actually fully recognize and respect an approach that the behaviorists offer, which is about giving children routine. It's about holding children accountable to the way in which they behave in a compassionate way. And actually, discipline is a really helpful thing. I work in leadership, and I often talk about discipline as being the thing that is stronger than motivation. As sometimes I wake up unmotivated for whatever reason, but because I have discipline, I keep going. So discipline is actually really important, a trait to embody. But I also recognize that these children have been through trauma, usually from adults that have supposed to have cared for them or are supposed to have nurtured them. So we need to add additional nurture for these young people. So I sit closer to nurture than I do behaviorists, but I would absolutely recognize that this behaviorist approach is critical. It is super critical for the young people that we care for. So the moralist, from my perspective, if we're going to sit a bit closer to nurture, but recognize that behavior is an important role to play, has three values. So number one is to be a safe adult. Number two is to have practical tools. And number three is to know young people. So let's go through each of those values. So first, being a safe adult. What I want you to do for just a second is I want you to reflect on the words that we use when we describe children with a social worker. Now, I'm specifically here talking about children that have a social worker because of challenges at home. So I just want you to for a minute, just reflect on some of those words and maybe try and think of 5 words that you can write down that pop into your head when you think about children with a social worker. Okay. So language is important. We talk about language a lot in social care. This is no new conversation. It is a conversation that we're having all of the time. When we're talking about language, we tend to communicate also that the words that we use about children for the social worker are wrong. So we need to change the words that we use about children with a social worker because when they read them, it's uncomfortable and it's difficult. Or we'll say actually like the words that we are writing about young people, we then give to other people and it doesn't truly represent them. One of the biggest things that we always end up talking about, which we need to be mindful of, is that social workers and those that are actually writing them are to blame for these words. We kind of say, well, social workers are writing all these negative things about children. It's their fault. And it often feels like blame. Up until now, today, actually changing the words that we use is a relatively new thing in the bigger context of the history of social care. We've been using words like, I'll just show you, we've been using words that we inherit, such as challenging, high risk, vulnerable, lack, sin, and damage. We've been using these words throughout the whole of our history. And it's only very recent we've actually started to think, oh, these could potentially be damaging. So we need people to change the words that we use. And what that can feel for people is that we're blaming them, essentially, and that it's their fault that these words are being used and therefore they need to change their behavior. I have a different view of it completely, is that we actually inherit these words. when we move into a corporate parenting position or we move into social care, as with all organizations and all cultures and all narratives within organizations, we inherit them. And these are the words that we inherit. We don't make them up. We don't decide one day, these children are challenging, these children are high risk, these children are vulnerable. They're not our own thoughts. They are not original thoughts. They're the inherited language that exists within the organization. And I imagine some of the words that you thought about, you'd have written down, and you can see on the slides that I've probably got some of the words on those slides that you've written down. So what that tells us is that somewhere in our unconscious, we store these words. They sit in our unconscious. The problem with that is that behind these words, we'll then interpret them with particular meaning. So challenging might mean that they're going to display challenging behavior in school. High risk might be that they're dangerous to be around. Vulnerable, they can't possibly look after themselves. Lack in sin, they're lacking in sinful. I know that obviously not many people think in that way. In fact, I would probably think that nobody actually thinks they're lacking in sinful. But for a young person to call them a lack or to call them sin, it's just degrading. And it's an unfortunate abbreviation of the language, of the words that we use. And that damaged is that they're broken. Now, when we get caught on things like this, when we go through those narratives and we start to think, oh gosh, they're broken, we might then start thinking, well, maybe they're completely unfixable. And that's about how expectation is born. You know, we start to expect these young people to be a certain way. And in this particular situation, we might start to think that they're unfixable. You know, how broken are they? Now, if they're super broken, then surely we can't help, because your expectations are going to influence your actions. It's just what happens. You know, if you expect that you can't do something, or if you expect and genuinely believe that you can't do something, you probably won't even try. Now, this narrative, I can't help, is one of the biggest problems with children's social care, is that we have a workforce, or we have a system that is filled with language that creates a narrative often that makes us feel like we can't help. We read such negative things about these young people that those reading those negative things think they can't help. Now, if I put this into a school and a foster care perspective, foster carers will read profiles about young people and say, no, I don't want them in my home, which is why we have such a problem that we can't find teenagers foster placements, because they just reject teenagers. And the same with schools. Schools will also say, not in my school. Now, we'll often then blame them to say, you know, oh, you're judging X, Y, and Z. But the reality is that no translates to we can't help, because the document that I've read about this young person is making me believe that I can't help. Now, that is the biggest problem from my perspective. That is today's biggest problem. The problem isn't that young people are going to read the nasty and incorrect words that we use about them and feel sad about it. That's a later problem. They'll read them when they leave care. They put in a subject access request, and then they get all of those case files and they go through them. That's a much later problem. And to be fair, they've left care at that point. The problem that this creates today is that our narrative around children in care makes us feel that we can't help. Therefore, it makes us feel that we're redundant. The very thing that we put ourselves forward to do was to help children. Every single interview as social worker, there will be the narrative of like, I just want to help kids. Like, I just want to make a difference in people's lives. It is the core motivation to get into this piece of work and into this world. But the way in which our system is set up is it leaves us with the belief that we can't help. And then we try and justify that belief. The seconds that we get it caught up in our mind with things like this, we tell ourselves we can't help. We say we don't have the right skills. We say we've not had the appropriate training. We say, I don't know what it's like to have their difficulties. And we say we're anxious we'll get something wrong. This is known as confirmation bias. When you have a belief about something, you seek information to confirm it. Now, let me explain confirmation bias in a really simple way that you'll really understand. I don't know if any of you have ever put on a new outfit which you've not been too sure about. I like to wear sometimes some quite loud jackets, floral jackets, and I'll leave the house in the morning. I'm like, I'm not too sure. And all the time that pops into my head, I'm like, I'm not too sure. So I'll ask somebody, I'll say, what do you think of the jacket? And they'll tell me that they love it. They'll say, I love that jacket. But still, you're like, I'm not too sure. So you'll ask somebody else to say, yeah, no, I love the jacket. But you still don't believe them. So I ask a third person. The third person might slightly hesitate and say, well, and the second they say that, I have this overwhelming feeling inside, which is like, I knew it. I will believe that person that is confirming the thing that I deeply believe, that this jacket I'm not too sure about, over two people that tell me I look great. Now, how that relates into this particular scenario, if the belief in this scenario, the jacket in this scenario is the belief that I can't help, we're going to do everything we can to confirm that. Such as, I don't have the right skills, I've not had the right training, I don't know what it's like to have their difficulties. We look for that external validation. And as a corporate parent, as a Leeds member, as someone that works in the senior space in social care, or as someone that has peers around them, we absolutely have to actively challenge these beliefs. If we hear people saying, oh, I don't think I can help, we must tell them, you absolutely can help. 100% you can help. These young people have had unsafe adults, and all they need is safe adults. And you are a safe adult. You can help. So speaking of adults, let's look at Sam's parenting. So this is Sam. Sam had a non-nurturing mum, a neglectful and absent dad, and a strict and abusive stepdad. This happened between the ages of 0 and 10, and two very specific ages. 0 and 4 is before you go to school. Usually, sometimes we start preschool a little bit earlier, but that's the general timeline. And then from 5 onwards, we're at school. So this is two critical development phases for a child. When they're at home, they're starting to build their relationships with their parents. They're building their initial attachment style based on Ainsworth and Bowlby's work. They want the attention of their parents. They need it to survive. Therefore, they will develop trust and they know what a mum and dad is. As they get a little bit older, they start to understand logic a bit better and make connections. They start to mirror adults. They start to understand male and female roles, which is the evolution of mum and dad, like mum and dad, male and female, if they're living in an environment where their parents, are male and female. They're learning what is good and what is bad through usually the avoidance of punishment. But something might be good at home, which is going unpunished, which might not be good in school. So let's just say if at home throwing your toys goes unpunished, it's just ignored, then, you're not being punished for it, therefore it's fine to do. You go and throw a toy in school, you get told off. Children that have got healthy school and home environments can self-correct. They can go, oh, actually, like, maybe this isn't okay, it was okay at home, and, it's not in school, and they can self-correct. And obviously you start to build relationships with your peers, which is, outside of building just relationships with your parents. So what does Sam's brain tell us? Because Sam has had this difficult experience. We've gone through Sam's timeline. What's Sam's brain telling us? It says, my parents don't love me. When they're around, they're always fighting, and when I cry, no one comforts me. Also says, my dad hits my mum and my mum doesn't seem to care about me. I can't trust my parents. They don't keep me safe. As Sam gets a bit older, their brain starts to say this. My parents shout at each other, so I'll shout too. Dads and stepdads are violent. Maybe that's what it means to be a man. Shouting and hitting are actually good because it's what my parents do. And I'll have relationships like what I have with my parents, which is also known as attachment theory. So attachment theory basically states that by month 9 of your life, your attachment style is defined based on the relationship that you have with your primary caregiver. So that's either mum, dad, or, whoever your primary caregiver is in being brought up. So it might be a mum, it might be a dad, in same-sex relationships, it'll be one figure over the other. You build a primary attachment figure, and your style of attachment is based on that relationship with that person. There's 4 styles of attachment. In a really simple way to explain it is there is 3 unsecure attachments. So attachments that are unsecure. We don't want unsecure attachments. We want the one secure attachment. So the four styles, essentially, all we need to know is that we want to have the style that's called the secure attachment, which is where a child feels safe with people. Now, from my perspective, to say that your attachment style is defined by 9 months old is nonsense. Even though that's what the relationship theories state, it's nonsense. You just need to think about it in your own perspective and your own life. There are certain people that you will feel comfortable around, and there are certain people that you won't feel comfortable around. So from my perspective, your attachment style is actually fluid and dependent on the relationship you have with different people. So like, I don't know, if I was dating, for example, and I go on a date, I meet somebody, I might feel really safe, I might talk, it might feel great. I then go on a date with somebody else because I'm dating, and actually I feel unsafe and this isn't nice and I feel judged. I haven't got a problem. I'm just responding to the relationships that I'm building with people. So your relationships are actually fluid, and it's really important to say that into this space, because in social care, there is a heavy, heavy, heavy focus on attachment theory, and so they should be, but that theory has limitations. It's very old research, 1960s. It says that at 9 months old, our attachment style is definite, it's fixed. But actually, if we just think about that in the perspective of our own lives, if I was to say to you, I've assessed you, you've got an unsecure attachment style, you might be a little bit offended because I'm labeling you, I'm judging you, all that kind of stuff. And the problem with those labels is that if we kind of say, yeah, this psychology is absolute, then we start to label children and we start to see them through the lens of that label. This child has got an unsecure attachment, therefore they can't attach to people. And we start to communicate that narrative too. Very dangerous. Just think about it. There are people in your life, there are colleagues sat around you right now that you will feel really safe with. And there are some that you will try very hard to probably avoid, and that's fine. So let's talk about the brain. What's going on in the brain? Because we can safely say for Sam, if this has been Sam's experience so far, Sam's brain is going to feel threatened. Excuse me. Now, when Sam's brain feels threatened, it's going to go into a particular response, which is called what's a survival response. But before I get to that, I just want to tell you what the brain's designed to do. It's designed to see patterns, and it's designed to survive. They're kind of like somewhat symbiotic of each other. Patterns and recognizing patterns help us survive, because if we know what's coming, we know how to respond to it. We develop a way to respond to things that are familiar. So they're kind of like symbiotic of each other. So when we're talking about pattern seeking, we're talking about things that are familiar and unfamiliar. We're not talking about things that are right and things that are wrong. So for example, familiar might be seeing abuse. We know that is wrong and it's not right, but the brain doesn't see it like that. The brain just sees it as familiar. Unfamiliar might be having a loving and safe relationship, which we see as right. So like those of us that kind of say, well, yeah, obviously abuse is wrong, and I don't understand why this child doesn't see it in that way. It's because a child recognizes that as familiar. And obviously, like, I'm offering this loving, caring relationship to this child, but they don't seem to be responding in a loving and caring way because it's unfamiliar. Unfamiliar makes your brain go into a survival response where you're very suspicious. You're trying, is this dangerous? Is this not dangerous? Whereas familiar, obviously, you know how to respond to it. And I've got a few analogies because I love analogies. So this one I've made up. I just thought, like, back in the day, imagine when we were living in caves and we came out of the cave to see a new world, and the whole world, everything was brand new. The trees, everything was, the grass, everything was brand new. It was lovely. Oh, maybe it wasn't lovely. And we see a tiger, and the tiger obviously eats us. That's not good. That's bad. So that we can be scared of the tiger. Do you know what I mean? The tiger is a scary thing because it eats us. So we start to recognize that new things, familiar things, are dangerous. They're very dangerous, and the tiger is a scary thing. So we know to run away from the tiger. That's the survival mechanism that we develop from this familiar thing. Run away from the tiger because it'll eat you. Now you come out the next day and you see, I don't know, a beautiful giraffe, a big giraffe. it's unfamiliar. So it's familiar. So the first thing you do is you run away because new things you run away from. And over time, as you start to come out and you start to realize that giraffe's not going to chase you, you're going to relearn or unlearn the fact that everything that you see that is new is scary. And in fact, that this giraffe in itself isn't scary. It's the best analogy I can think of. In the perspective here of children, they're going to see all adults as unsafe if they have experienced unsafe adults in their primitive years. So the adults in this case are the tiger. They come out into the world. They have experienced this unsafe adult, the tiger, who has hurt them. Now they come back out into the world or into a new world of social care and they see more adults. And these are giraffes. These are safe. But the child is in the kind of familiar space that all adults are unsafe. And it's unfamiliar actually when an adult shows safety. So they're going to push and they're going to feel scared in that particular space and they're going to be assessing threat. Best analogy I can give you, but you see the point. So when we're scared of these unsafe or these perceived unsafe adults, we go into survival mode. And like I said, lots of things can scare us. It can be a snarling dog. And it puts us into these 4 states: fight, flight, freeze, and flop. Now, each of us will respond differently. If we feel threatened, if we see a threat, some of us will run towards it. Some of us will run away from it. Some of us will just freeze and not do anything. And some of us will just fall on the floor. So like I said, for Sam, it might not be a snarling dog. It might be a relationship, because relationships in the past have been threatening. So when Sam tries to get comfort from us, the brain's going to recognize that as a threat for 2 reasons, actually. Number one, adults are unsafe. Adults have been unsafe. That's the familiar. The second threat is unfamiliar, because actually, like, unfamiliar is also is scary for Sam in this perspective, is that actually they're showing love and care. This is unfamiliar. This feels scary. Quite simply, all that is because relationships have been threatening in the past. The brain has developed the pattern to see what that looks like. Now, we all know what it's like to have threatening relationships. We've actually developed language for it. We call it the red flag. So if anybody watching this is dating, you will know we have that common cultural phrase when we're talking about dating with our friends. We say, oh, saw a red flag. And that basically means, like, I recognize that there was a threat in this situation. Now, we respond to red flags differently. We have logic and we are regulated most of the time. We can see that threat, we can usually assess it's coming. If we see that red flag, we've kind of got this like little bit of awareness, but on the other part of our minds, because we're adults, we're like, maybe I'll give them a chance. Whereas children might respond to it more emotively, which is with more emotions and unregulated responses, quite simply because actually children are children and they learn their regulated and logical response from adults. And until they learn that, naturally they're emotional and unregulated. Feelings are new, emotions are new. They look to adults and they say to adults, I'm feeling this big thing inside. Help me understand what it is. And I don't know how to manage this big thing inside that I'm feeling, this thing. So it's becoming unregulated. It's all over the place. And adults kind of contain that and they say, hey, listen, this is fear. Oh, hey, listen, this is sadness. Oh, wow, you're experiencing joy. Like, yeah, I'm going to run with you. You know, like we help young people understand these emotions and how to regulate them. And that's the responsibility of an adult. In fact, it's just how it works. It's not a responsibility. It's just what will happen. The way in which you respond to a child's emotions will teach them how to regulate those emotions. That is just how it works. There's no avoiding that. It's just the rule of adult and child relationships. So logically, if I see a threat in a relationship, let's say I'm dating and I see this red flag, can I go on a date and somebody says something, I'm like, oh God, red flag. I ring my friend and I say, hey, listen, saw a red flag. My friend talks to me, helps me understand that logically and says, do you know what? Let's say the red flag is that this person is into ethical non-monogamy. They like to date multiple people. And they've told me on date one, I like to date multiple people. I'm like, that's a massive red flag. Is that I'm not interested in that. I'm monogamous. So I ring my friend, I say, danger, danger. They want to date everybody. My friend says, go back, communicate your boundaries, say to them, look, not for me, thank you. If this is going to continue, like, don't want to be multiply dating. Just want this to be a monogamous thing we've got going on. And I've got the ability to communicate that logic with that person while staying regulated, also respecting that the fact that that might be the thing that they want, it's not the thing that I want. So we can get into this boundaries communication, bit of an exchange. And then let's say that we make this agreement, but unfortunately someone doesn't stick to the agreement. I can feel sad. So I'll sit with my emotions and I'll be like, do you know what? Actually, I feel sad. I communicated my boundaries. I was let down. But like, actually, I went through a whole process there that primed me and got me ready for that. But I still gave it a go. Children, however, need to learn that from adults. So until they do that, this is what might happen. They might panic. Or, like, I love this person, they're going to go because in the past people have gone. So if they're going to go, actually they're going to go. I need to push them away. I need to get rid of them soon. Do you know what I mean? It's easier to control when somebody goes and know that you've got some control over it. So if I'm fearful that you're going to go, or if I'm fearful that you're going to hurt me, because that's what's happened in the past, I will confirm my belief. Just like I said to you previously, I will do what I can to confirm that, which is I'm going to push you away because I want you to go to confirm that belief. Or I might do something that might sort of enact some form of violence if I'm feeling that I'm going to be hurt by you because I've been hurt in the past. I might do something to try and instigate that. So I'm pushing people away, I'm panicking, I'm being triggered, and I'm kind of all of this. I'm everywhere because my brain is survival orientated. It's trying to get rid of the threat. It's trying to control the familiarity and get to it. It's doing all sorts. It's very complex and complicated. And we often then are dealing with young people or responding to young people that are in this particular state. Now, obviously, when you're feeling this way, how that is communicated is through behavior. Their brain's gone into survival. And they're communicating that through behavior, which is panicky behavior. All you need to do in that particular situation is to make Sam feel safe. That's it. All I want you to tell yourself as a corporate parent is, how can I make this young person feel safe? They feel unsafe. It's got nothing to do with me. It's got nothing to do with, like, you might have said something that, may have triggered them. You might have shown them love and care, which might have made them feel scared. You might be representing a relationship which to them feels threatening. But that isn't actually anything to do with you. It's nothing personal. It's how the young person is perceiving that. They are perceiving that as a threat. That doesn't mean that you are threatening. Doesn't mean that you are bad. Doesn't mean that you're doing something wrong. Your intention is to show love, warmth, and care, and love and relationships. Your intention is to do good. It's just there's this really complex space where this wonderful intention that you put forward, which is like, I'm going to give you my heart and care and warmth, that young person then becomes threatened. They then push that away. And then what happens is a division is created, because then you feel a little bit hurt. You're like, oh, what's going on? And we end up in this space where it is difficult. And it's a real unique blend of personal and professional. Obviously, we talk a lot about keeping our personal out of work. We really can't do that in this particular situation, because if we're going to be talking about relationships and building relationships with young people, if we're going to be talking about love, care, warmth, like, they aren't words that sit within corporate organizations. That's because this is about corporate parenting. And the thing that we need to focus on here is that we're parents, and that we need to be able to offer that nurture. Like I said right at the start, that nurture approach while maintaining boundaries. And we do that by ensuring young people feel that they're safe. And if they're responding in a particular way, I'll talk to you about how to deal with some of those things. If they're swearing at us, pushing us away, there's a way to say, like, I can really see that you're hurting. Swearing at me is really not kind. I really, really care about you. I can see that you're in pain. There's a way to separate reason and behavior. But the trick here is to recognize that Sam just needs to feel safe. It's super, super, super critical. Okay, so what I want to take you through now is essentially what it can potentially look like when we're talking to young people and they're presenting particular behaviours. And I want to give you some practical tools to be able to respond to those behaviours. But before I do that, I want to talk a little bit more about the language that we use about children in care. And I want to do that by showing you Sam's profile. So Sam's profile says these things. 16 years old, so they're a teenager, we're already a little bit scared. Sam's a male, so we're even more scared now. We know that statistically, there's lots of data that shows us that teenage males are often the young people that need the most support, and often the young people that are being rejected the most by the system. Sam's profile also says they're a high risk of absconding. They're a persistent young offender with offences including burglary and affray. They're known to deal with drugs and has been caught with drugs at school. Has stolen previous foster carer's car in the night. Low attendance at school and is disengaged with other pupils. Has issues with attachment. Isolates themselves in their room. We are seeking psychological assessment as we think this links to early childhood trauma. Disruptive behaviour when confronted with authority, and their outbursts are hard to control. Struggles to follow simple house rules when living in a foster placement. And it's hard to build rapport as could be guarded and closed. Now, the impact of this, from my perspective, of these words that are written down on statutory documents, this what I'm showing you here, will usually be seen by a foster carer, a social worker, and a head teacher before they meet Sam. So we're saying to them, can you please read this? And once you've read this, can you please make a decision? And that decision, especially for a foster carer and a head teacher, is can Sam come into your school or live in your house based on this? The impact of that often then goes back to this idea that you can't help, like I said previously, which then gets confirmed with these kind of statements. So I think about the children in my school. It's a safeguarding concern. Maybe a special place would be better. It's too high risk. And ultimately, sadly, this is not going to be the right place for Sam. Now, there's a really quick way in which we can fix this sort of mentality. And when we're looking at those words, we could actually just reframe them. So as a corporate parent, one of the things that I want to discuss and to share with you is essentially how we look beyond these words and understand the young people in front of us. Now, often we get worried about having conversations with young people about certain things because we're scared we're going to cause further harm. So I want you to just imagine this world for a second. I want you to imagine that changing words won't change worlds. So actually, like, changing what we write about young people isn't going to change anything for them whatsoever. I just want you to imagine that world for a second, which is counterintuitive and a counter narrative to the narrative about words. There is so much work being done around words and changing words, language that cares. And I just want you to get rid of that for a second and just let this sink in. Changing words it won't change the world. Why is that? Well, if, let's say, for me, I was a looked after child when I was in care, so 17, 18, 20 years ago. Now when I navigate in the space and I'm talking to colleagues and I use the word black, looked after child, maybe I don't abbreviate, and someone says, no, Luke, we don't use that anymore. You need to stop using that language. All of a sudden, my history is being deleted. I'm not that bothered about it personally. I'm just yeah, cool, whatever. I'm making this point in terms of the weaknesses in this idea of just changing the words is going to make a difference. Number two, let's say care leaver is the problem word. The reason why that's the problem word is because housing providers, they won't give care leavers a house. So somebody clever somewhere says, let's change the title. Let's call it previously looked after, which we can do, which we often do. We change the language, or lack now is children we care for, and it's different in different spaces. But previously looked after, the housing provider isn't just going to start giving care leavers houses because we've changed the title to previously looked after. The problem is deeper than that. The problem is that the housing provider believes that children that leave the care system, or that the care system leaves them, which is more accurate, are going to trash their house. They're going to have house parties. They're going to have these beliefs. It doesn't matter what word we use. They're still going to believe these kids that come out of care are going to behave in this particular way. So no, you can call it whatever you want, but no. So changing those words isn't going to change the world. And in actually just changing the words is such a waste of time. Like, dare I say it, such a waste of resource. We need to actually change the meaning in the words. We need to actually like perceive these people differently. We need to perceive care experience people differently. We need to perceive looked after children differently, or whatever we want to call them. We need to see them differently. And changing the words isn't going to necessarily do that. Not at first, anyway. You know, we need to actually just get to know our young people. I want you to imagine a second world. Now, that second world is that a subject access request for case notes doesn't exist. So a child, when they leave care, cannot put in a subject access request to get their files. They can't put in a subject access request to get those files. The reason being is because at any point in real time on their mobile phone, they can access their files. We've got a new system. We don't need subject access requests because at any point, a child can access their case notes and they can read stuff like this. Just imagine that world for a second. Young person pulls out their phone. They're 12 years old. 12 years old. And they click, like when we've got our NHS app and we can access our hospital and health records, you know, we can do it as adults. 12 years old, pulls out their phone. They click social care. They click their name and it opens up what we wrote about them yesterday. Just imagine that. Now, there'll be lots of different feelings going on for you, I'm sure. But like for some of you, you'll be like, this is ridiculous. This is going to be a harmful thing for a young person to read. And I want you to hold on to that. Why have we created a system that if a young person was to access instantaneously, we're causing harm? And some of you will be thinking that. You'll be thinking, no, that will be completely inappropriate. A 12-year-old reading things that we write about and all of those case notes and all that kind of stuff. The reality is they've experienced the life that we're writing about up until the point of them reading those case notes. Like it's all stored in their memory. Just seeing it on paper is the things that's stored in their memory. And why do we reject that so much? The idea that we're going to cause harm or that we're going to upset them based on what they read. Why is that the thing and not the thing that actually, well, then maybe we need to be recognizing we've got ultimate accountability here to ensure what we do communicate about young people truly represents them and it's truly their story. I want to see a world where young people can access their case notes instantaneously. And I'll tell you why I want to see that world. Because accessing these case notes and what is written about you while you're in care has some benefit. Number one, we can work with young people to rewrite those narratives. And number two, what's critically important is as they're reading those things that are written, they have people around them to help and support them. They have people around them that they can talk to about what they're reading. They have a family, our corporate family around them that says, you know what, as you go through this journey of reading these things that are on this system, we're here to let you know we care about you. And actually, we want to change the way that these things are written because we want to make sure that you're truly seen, you're heard, that we represent you in the right way. This is going to be an uncomfortable experience. I'm sure there's going to be things that you're going to read that are not going to feel nice. But what I want you to know, young person, is that I'm holding your hand and I'm right by your side as we go through this. Your alternative is the system that we have today. 18 years old, they put in a subject access request. They've left care. There's no support. There's no one checking in. There's no one at the end of the phone. They're completely independent, living in their independent situations, which we know for care leavers often are dire, traumatic, uncomfortable living situations. On top of that, they access their case notes and they read all of this alone, sat in a room with no one to communicate or hold accountable to, with no one to help them with all those really difficult feelings of all of those historic notes that have been written. Many of them have been scribbled out with big black redacted um, lines because of people wanting to remain anonymous, and the idea of and the thought and the impulse of wanting to know what's behind these black lines, what people have said or written about these people. That's the reality. The reality today is that actually young people are being left to deal with this on their own. I want to see a world where young people can access it instantaneously and we can rewrite those stories with them. That is a better world. And what might the outcome of that world be? Well, let's look at it. Imagine that Sam has sat down with somebody and gone through each line of that profile. And somebody's had a conversation with Sam to say, hey, Sam, I'm reading this profile about you and I don't see you in it. I want to actually understand what's gone on in each of these situations. And I want to write down your side of the story. Sam is high risk of absconding. Well, actually, Sam was late home and his foster carers were told to report him missing. Sam came home actually at 8 o'clock, was supposed to be at home at 6:30. And the foster carers, because they were an hour late home, were told, you need to report Sam missing. The foster carers didn't even want to do it. They were just following process. But because of that, Sam's high risk of absconding. But he was just late home. A persistent young offender with offences including burglary and affray. Sam took his own property from his parents' house. He'd fallen out with his parents. He went around to their house when they were out, climbed through a window, took their property that the parents wouldn't give them, took their Xbox, took some of their clothes, and their parents called the police because of it. Sam got done for burglary. Sam was then attacked in the street by their parents, and Sam got done for affray for fighting back. Sam took their own property, and because they took that, their parents found them and attacked them for it. Sam got labelled burglary and affray. Known to deal with drugs and has been caught with drugs at school. Well, Sam smoked weed with their friends at school. You know, for a child not in care, we call this experimental behaviour. For a child in care, the system tells them that we have to get the police involved and we have to get a drugs worker involved. Has stolen previous foster carer's car in the night. Sam was frightened and lonely. They took their foster carer's car to see their mum. They regretted doing it, and they only ever did it once. Low attendance at school and is disengaged with other pupils. Sam is being constantly moved foster placement at the moment. Every time Sam is moved foster placement, they're moving school. And Sam doesn't want to move foster placement. Sam wants to stay in the same school. And what we're starting to see now is Sam's just not going to school because we keep moving Sam so much. Sam's just saying, what's the point? You're going to move me again. And Sam is right. In fact, we don't have a permanent placement for Sam because of the sufficiency issues that are existing in social care. It's a problem that we're creating. Has issues of attachment. Well, Sam struggles to feel safe with people. Sam has had a lot of unsafe adults in their life, and Sam just needs to have safe adults in their life. Isolates themselves in their room. We are seeking psychological assessment as we think this links to early childhood trauma. Sam's family were really abusive. When Sam is reminded of this, because we keep saying to Sam, oh, Sam, tell us about the abuse that you went through, Sam actually just leaves the conversation, goes to their room, and when we check in on Sam, Sam's crying. So I think at this moment in time, actually, we need to be a bit more sensitive about talking to Sam about their abuse from childhood because it's making Sam cry. Disruptive behaviour when confronted with authority and their outbursts are hard to control. Sam's history is that Sam has lived in a house where abuse was completely normal. Everybody was living under a roof of abuse. So one thing that really scares Sam because of that experience is that when people shout, Sam just actually gets quite scared because obviously living in a house where abuse and shouting was normal. It scares Sam. Sam struggles to follow simple house rules when living in a foster placement. Sam's actually moved to lots of different foster placements because we've only been able to offer Sam temporary care at this moment in time. For Sam, that means that the rules have kept changing. You know, some houses Sam's been allowed to keep his shoes on, some houses he hasn't. And obviously trying to keep up with those constant changes of rules can be quite difficult. So it's really helpful for Sam actually just when Sam comes in to just explain to Sam what the rules are of the house. And then Sam will feel very settled. Actually, that's all we need to do. It's hard to build rapport with Sam as Sam can be guarded and closed. Well, Sam just wants to be loved, just like all young people. What I want you to do for just a second is just take a minute, is to reflect on those two stories. The profile, the system in which writes about Sam, and the story, the reality of Sam's life. Only through having brave conversations with Sam today and saying to Sam, hey Sam, what's going on here? Help me understand, help me contextualize, help me know your story. Help me understand what I should be telling people about you. What is it that you want people to know about your experiences? I'm feeling confident that we actually imagine a world where Sam can read these at any point, at any time, just like we can access our NHS. Yes, that's correct. Health records. I want Sam to be able to access their social care records at any time, because that's safer than Sam actually reading them on their own when they're 18 years old. And it gives us an opportunity to understand the story. We just need a workforce and individuals just like you, moralists, corporate parents just like you, that feel skilled and confident to be able to ask Sam questions that might feel tricky, they might feel difficult, there might be conversations that will be hard to hold, but they're imperative, because holding those hard conversations ensures that we can understand Sam's story. And if we understand Sam's story, it's not about changing the words, is it? It's about recognizing and knowing our young people, which is the key to a moralist, knowing your young people. Most importantly, if we know our young people and we know their story, I completely believe that it eradicates this idea that we can't help, and it transforms it into, I want to help. The idea of wanting to help. Imagine that for a young person. A young person has spent their whole life thinking, nobody cares, nobody wants to help. And actually meeting somebody that says, you know what, Sam, I want to help. It's all about being a safe adult. So the three things of the moralist, obviously, being a safe adult, having practical tools, and understanding our young people. So I've told you about a safe adult. We now know our young people, because if we can translate those systems into stories, we kind of fully know who our young people are. And what I want to leave you with is a practical tool. And this simple tool that I'm going to leave you with is a communication tool to tell young people, you know what? We are safe. We're safe adults. You know, no matter what position you're working in this corporate family, whether you're a social worker, whether you're leaving care PA, whether you're a lead member, whether you're a director, whether you're an assistant director, service manager, police officer, health visitor, teacher, head teacher, designated teacher, you know, no matter who you are, we all have the opportunity to let young Sam and our young people know that we are safe. And in doing so, reversing this belief or unlearning this belief that all adults are unsafe, which is the key, from my perspective, actually, to corporate parenting in general, you know, creating safe relationships, you know, but it's one of the imperatives of a moralist. Now, why this tool is essential, because it doesn't matter what position that you're operating or working within it, anybody can use it. You know, if you're a lead member watching this, you might be thinking, well, I don't see young people that often. I only ever see them, you know, in small passing moments or when I go to an event. And this is a great tool for you. Why it's so great is because young people often share with you their story. And lead members, for example, don't often get the training to actually be able to respond to those stories appropriately. They might not feel confident to do it. You know, if you're a social worker watching this, you'll be dealing with young people every single day that are sharing their stories. And having tools to be able to respond to what they say to you is critical. Same with foster carers and teachers, assistant directors, you know, all of them. This is a really helpful tool. And the tool is designed in that actually when a young person says something to us, sometimes it can put us into a space of feeling unsafe. Let's say, for example, they say, God, I hate moving foster placement. I hate my foster carer. Like, many people will deal differently with that. You know, some people might be able to respond to it. Some people might be the first time. If you're a teacher, it might be the first time you've just heard that child's in care. There's two things going on for you. Number one, foster care just told that they hate something. Number two, God, this child's in care. You know, you can put us into an unsafe space. We all want to respond in the best way possible to let that young person know that they're cared for and they're loved. It's just ingrained in us as human beings, as adults. We want our young people around us to grow and to feel safe. But sometimes we can feel that we haven't got the tools to do it. And this is one of them to do it. It's called Recognize, Reassure, and Redefine. And it's designed for when young people are in your presence and they say something to you that might present difficult emotions. They might be sharing something that is uncomfortable or sad. And they're saying it to you. They're disclosing it to you. Now, it's worth saying before I share with you this particular tool, if a young person discloses anything like abuse, neglect, obviously there are safeguarding systems in place that we need to follow, and you will know what they are. And within your organizations, if you don't, please seek those out. But, you know, in a nutshell, if a young person discloses abuse, there is a process that exists within your organizations that will follow something like this. It will say, you know, I have to tell somebody about this. You're not in trouble. I just want to make sure you're safe. So familiarize yourself with that process. There are obviously things that young people will say to you that are not a risk. And these are the things that I'm going to talk to you about. This is a tool to respond to those. Let's say, for example, Sam says, I hate moving foster placement. We just need to recognize that and say to Sam, that sounds like a really tough experience. We can even say thank you. You know, thank you for sharing that with me. If we can see Sam is unregulated, Sam's feeling difficult emotions because of it, we want to reassure Sam. We want to say, hey, Sam, recognize that moving foster placement is really tough for you right now. I can see that. Look, I'm here to listen, and I'll always listen if you want to talk about this. Now, pause for a second. Why I said safeguarding is really important is because obviously if some people disclose something like abuse, you can't say, I'm here to listen. I'll always listen, you know, obviously. So I recognize that this is happening. I need to tell somebody. But in the scenario here, hey, Sam, they might say, you don't care. So that's a really difficult and tricky feeling for you to have. I actually do care. I really do care. And I want to do everything I can to show you that. Again, another way of recognizing and reassuring. They're saying, you don't care. So all you're saying is actually, I want to do everything I can to show you that I do care, which is a form of reassurance. It's saying to them, look, I'm here for you. I care about you. That's what it's saying. You're communicating your safety. You know, I've had such a bad experience with A, B, and C. I recognize, Sam, that you've been through things that you didn't deserve. I can see that that's painful for you right now. I'm always here to listen. You know, moving into reassure. I'm always here to listen. You can always talk to me about that. I'm here for you. Yeah? I can see it's hard. Reassure. Recognize, sorry. I can see it's hard. I can see that you're saying this thing to me right now. And what I see when you say it is this emotion. It's pain. It's difficult feeling. I see that too. See what you're saying. See how you feel. I want to reassure you. I can contain and hold this. And I'm going to support you as much as I can. I'm always here for you. I want you to stay there for as long as it takes for that child to start to present safety back to you, that they feel safe. So that recognizing and reassuring is helping them regulate. It's helping them come back down. It's helping them say, okay, I feel safe with this person. You'll see it. That might not take 5 minutes. That might take a day, actually. It might even take a couple of days. You're going back and you're kind of still popping up and you just recognize, reassure, recognize, reassure, recognize, reassure, recognize, reassure. Okay, now I can see this young person is feeling safe. And I want you to offer them a redefine. And I want you to do it like this. Let's just say foster care, hate moving foster care as the example. Let's say it happened in school. And we've gone, recognize that's a difficult experience, recognize that it's painful for you. I can see it. Look, I'll always talk to you about it. And then in 2 days' time, you see that Sam's feeling better about it. And you say, hey, Sam, how are you doing today? Yeah, I'm okay. Hey, listen, I just wanted to share something with you. Okay. You know, seeking permission is always sometimes helpful. Can I share something with you? Helps the brain when someone says yes, they're already ready to receive the information. Can I share something with you? You're okay. Or what? You know, look, the other day, obviously, you said moving foster placement is really tough. And I really recognize how difficult that conversation was. And I think it was really brave for you to have that with me. And thank you for sharing that with me. And I just want to reiterate, like, you can always talk to me about it. You're really, really, really reiterating that you're a safe person. And then say, but I've been thinking about that. Can I share something with you? Yeah, okay. Because we'll be curious at this point. Say, look, I know how hard it is. I can see